¿Quién de ustedes vive en un modo sobrevivencia y quién de ustedes vive en un modo de absoluta prosperidad y florecimiento? Hay un libro sensacional que se llama Don't Believe Everything You Think, no creas todo lo que piensas, de Joseph Nguyen, a quien tengo hoy en el programa para hablar de la diferencia entre los que piensan correctamente y los que no. A ver dónde están ustedes.
Everyone has thoughts, and every single person, most people live in their heads more than in the actual world. And what happens is the majority of the time that we suffer psychologically and emotionally, it comes because of our own thinking. Most people go through a lot of unfortunate events in life, and we can't stop that. We can't control most of the things that happen. But how is it possible that there are some people that go through similar situations but have a completely different outcome of life? How are they able to thrive instead of spiral down into a depression? That question really is the driving force behind a lot of my work, because therein lies the root cause of suffering. And it's not the events that happen in our lives, but how we think about the events that determine how we feel.
So give me an example.
A very, very simple example we can start with and build from there is an event that happens in the world. Let's say it's raining. A thought that we would have is it's raining. That is a neutral event that happens. But our thinking will say, this rain ruined my entire day, or this always happens to me, or this is the worst thing that could have happened today. That thinking about the thought or that thinking about the event completely changes our emotion, when the actual event was, it's raining, and that's it. And so when we think about these events and cast our own conditioning, our own judgments and criticisms on it, or more specifically, when we create a story around the event, that determines our emotion around it. And most of the time, our stories around the events that happen in our lives are negative. And we say, this always happens to me, or let's say we lose our job. That's an example. That is a neutral event. People lose their jobs all the time, and it's not a great experience. But the fact is, we lost our jobs and that's it. But most of us go and then think and say, I'm not enough, or I'll never find another job, or my life is ruined, or people are going to judge me. All of that is a story and is specifically thinking. That's what causes our suffering, not the actual event, but the story we tell ourselves.
Exactly.
But what happens when we let go of the story? Then it's just the event, and then there's peace again. So the story is what creates suffering.
I've always said, you can resignify whatever has happened in your life. And let me give you an example. My husband leaves me for a woman that is more beautiful than me and younger than me. I can either continue for the next 40 years of my life bitching about what happened to me and thinking that he's the worst person in the world, and that obviously there's something wrong with me, that I'm not enough, I'm not pretty enough, I'm not good enough, I'm not worthy enough. Or I can choose to say, thank you so much for this man. He opened the path so I can find a more compatible spouse, somebody that makes me more happy. And he has given me an amazing opportunity to understand what woman I am, what I want, what is negotiable, what is non-negotiable. So I am closer to choosing a better partner for my life. Those are two ways of seeing the same circumstance.
That's a beautiful way to explain the concept, much better than I could.
No, you've done a great job as well.
And you can kind of see how that same exact event is neutral. There's no needing to judge that specific situation.
Yeah.
It happened, it might be unfortunate, but what happens is every single thing that happens in our lives, it just happens for a reason. And we don't have to always know the reason, but in hindsight, we usually do. Yeah. And so instead of creating a story around whatever happened, I love to choose to let it go. And what happens when we let it go is all of the suffering is gone with it. But as soon as we keep thinking and ruminating and just pondering on that specific event, it traps us in that emotional roller coaster, and we're not able to escape it.
Why is it almost like second nature to human beings to have like immediate negative thoughts about you, about what's happened? Why are we so judgmental and so critical? Why are we so harsh and negative with ourselves? Why can't we operate the other way around? Why do we always do this? And why are we addicted to suffering?
That is the million-dollar question. And I love that you asked that. And that question puzzled me so much too, because it seems like we're almost engineered for failure because of all this. But if we kind of look at history and science, the reason why we automatically think negatively is because we're engineered to survive. For our ancestors, most of the time, we were fighting tooth and nail and in the forest, in the jungle, in the wild. And there's so many different things that could actually kill us. If we eat the wrong plant, if there's a saber-toothed tiger in the bush, other tribes coming in. And so back then, every single day was quite literally life and death. And so our minds, in order to help our body survive, would predict or try to forecast, is this a potential danger or not? And it's constantly scanning for that. And that's why we do that, is because we have a higher survival rate if we're able to almost think negatively or try to predict these negative outcomes. But the problem is that helps us survive, but not to thrive in a modern day and age. Thinking like that now, I mean, just think back, how many times in your life are you actually in a life or death situation? And that's kind of the key.
Well, actually, jealousy comes from the same time. It was like your survival instinct of not losing. Who will protect your offsprings? Who will feed you? And that is something that we're carrying up until today.
Yeah, and we live in an abundant world. We really do. If someone takes your one piece of food now, it doesn't mean that there's no more food left, that there's a limited supply. We're constantly growing food. And there's a bunch of different ways that we can upskill or learn new things to be able to get a better job or get paid more. And so that's how we live in an abundant world. But when we're living in a scarcity or survival mindset, we can't see those limitless possibilities in the present moment.
The question is, how do you change your mindset?
Traditionally, the way to change the mindset is to almost try to reprogram yourself using affirmations. I believe that does work to a certain extent, but it's very tiresome. And I've tried it a lot, and it does make you feel better momentarily, but I was looking for a more permanent solution. So an example of that would be using affirmations to feel better about yourself and saying, I love myself, or I am great, or I am beautiful, or I make lots of money. Those are great affirmations. But as soon as I stopped saying them, I stopped feeling that way. Then I asked myself, how can that be sustainable then? I don't want to walk around all day, every day, constantly repeating to myself that I am enough to feel enough. That doesn't make any sense. And I don't think monks are going around doing that, or people who are generally very happy. I don't think they're walking around talking to themselves all day doing that. And so I asked myself, is it required to tell yourself these things to feel that way? Is it only possible through thinking? And then I asked myself this question. Is it possible to feel peace without thinking? Is it possible to feel confident without needing to tell myself that I'm confident? Actually, when I do feel confident, what am I thinking?
How do you learn to retrain your mind to think different, to not become a victim of the way you think, therefore you feel regarding a specific event, and then become a victim of your suffering caused by yourself?
Any sort of change starts is awareness. Without an awareness that you want to change anything, nothing will, and everything will just continue on with that vicious cycle. So the first question you have to ask yourself is, do you actually want things to change or not? And some people just want to continue on with the same cycle, and that's okay. Sometimes we need to go through more situations similar to what we just went through enough before the pain gets worse than the fear of change. And that's usually when we decide to change, is when that pain of where you are now is greater than the fear of changing. So that's the point in which we'll begin. And so if you're at that point, then you have to ask yourself, do you want to be right or do you want peace? Everything boils down to that. Because if we feel like we're a victim, that means we feel like someone is wrong. And that means we are right. As long as we hold on to that thinking, the cycle will perpetuate. We will keep going through the same situation in our mind, and not just in our minds, but we'll start attracting similar situations. And that's why we kind of go through the same thing over and over again. If you've had that kind of friend where they keep talking about the same thing, complaining about the same person, or even different people, but the same situation, that's the reason. We're still holding on to the fact that we want to be right. But as soon as we want peace more than wanting to be right, that is when we actually change, because then we can let go of our ego.
And third,
the next part after we decide whether we want peace or not, here's the thing. There will always be situations where it's just not fair, and that will always happen. So, but if we just keep holding on to wanting to be right, these situations will just keep occurring. And so then we really have to boil it down to, do I just want peace now, or would I rather keep suffering? After we decide that we want peace, then we have to realize what our thinking is doing to us, constantly holding on to these thoughts and ruminating on it. And I love to ask myself this question: is this thinking useful? Is saying that this person wronged me, or I'm right, or this shouldn't have happened, or like they are an evil person, or blaming, criticizing, whatever it is that thinking actually helping me right now? Is it helping me find peace? And if not, that's when I choose to let it go, to create space for a new emotion to come in, new thoughts, new insights, maybe even love.
Joseph es el autor de un bestseller que se llama Don't Believe Everything You Think, no crean en todo en lo que piensan. Está traducido al español, lo encuentran en cualquier parte. Es Joseph Nguyen, que se escribe NGUYEN.org. Igualmente, it's Joseph Nguyen en Instagram y en Twitter y en YouTube. Vamos a tener parte 2 de esta conversación. Great talking to you, my friend. Thank you for the lovely thoughts for this Christmas. What a gift.
Thank you so much, Martha. I appreciate you and everything you're doing.